if we're going to get started, before we begin, I do want to lay down some ground rules. Both Maria and Isabella are here to present, and we ask you to be respectful of their voice and their time. Please don't interrupt, and please hold all questions until they have invited you to do so. If anyone has any issues they'd like to address, please feel free to message me. I will be acting as your safety and security officer.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having us virtually. I was really grateful to tune in last night to some of the opening panels, and I'm excited to tune in more today. And I'm just really grateful to be a part of this conference, even though we've kind of had to re-navigate what it looks like to connect in social justice and community organizing work. So thank you, first of all, and welcome to Our Stories, Our Flow, a conversation about menstruation virtual now with Women's Voices for the Earth. My name is Isabella. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the menstrual equity organizer at Women's Voices for the Earth. I have been since last February, and it's been an interesting time to kind of navigate the transition to making this workshop virtually accessible, but it's been rewarding at the same time. I'm also a doctoral student at the University of Denver, and I'm currently getting my PhD in religion. Maria, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, it's really funny that you use the same picture I have in my background, so you can see me.
Oh, look at that.
But anyway, my name is Maria Ignacia. I use she, her, and ella pronouns. I speak Spanish, so if anybody has any questions in Spanish, I can answer those. And I am the Program and Outreach Manager at Women's Voices for the Earth, and I've been with the organization since July of last year, so a little over a year. We've been hosting these workshops throughout the year, and it's really exciting to be able to do it for the Justice Now conference. So yeah, go ahead, take it away, Isabella.
We want to expand more on the kind of work that Women's Voices for the Earth does. It's an organization that functions to amplify women's voices to eliminate the toxic chemicals that harm our health and communities. And while today we're going to be talking about menstrual equity and really focusing on destigmatizing the way we talk about periods, Women's Voices for the Earth does other advocacy work in areas of safe cleaning, fragrance, salon products and cosmetics, and intimate care products. And we'll be talking about intimate care products today as well. But there are a lot of different areas for community organizing in Women's Voices for the Earth, and I happen to be organizing for menstrual equity. And Maria, if you have anything to add on this slide, I always invite you to.
Yeah, and we say we do our work with like 4 arms. So we work in all of those issue areas, and a way that we get our work done, right, and that we push for safer ingredients and ingredient disclosure is through organizing and outreach, which is what this presentation is about. Then we also do corporate campaigns, which have been our most successful campaigns, and the way that we've been able to shift the marketplace in the biggest way. We also do legislative advocacy, so we'll run bills or support other organizations who are running bills. And then we also do research, so we'll test products to make sure that what they're saying is in there is actually in there, or if they're not disclosing ingredients, that we're able to find out what is in these products, which is what's actually you're going to learn about intimate care products and menstrual care products. So yeah.
Before we dive into what menstrual equity is and the destigmatization of how we talk about our periods, I want to open with a period word association activity. I think you're welcome to, if you have capabilities, to unmute or type in the chat what words come to mind when you think about your period, any past experiences with menstruation or current experiences, intimate care products, tampons, pads, cups, cleansers, etc. Just a word or a phrase of what comes to mind when you think about your period.
And something that we forgot to mention, the workshop is really interactive. And so anytime you want to share stories or comments or have questions, feel free to um, throw them out at us because
Yes.
we're here to create dialogue about menstruation and vaginal health. So we're here. And I see some stuff in the chat already.
Awesome.
Yeah, we have.
Will you read some
Yeah, I
words
can read them.
for me? Thank you.
We've got cramps, and like time of the month, cravings, period panties. Oh my gosh, I haven't used them yet. Nice, and the Diva cup.
Mhm.
Cool.
Great. So that's great to see that there's already like kind of a diversity of intimate care products. But I think every single time that I've done this workshop in the past few months, a word that consistently comes up is cramping, or pain, or discomfort, or dread. That's kind of a word that I usually use to describe our periods. And so not inherently negative, but when I hear the word cramping, I typically I typically think negative thoughts. And so what is menstrual equity? Most commonly, menstrual equity refers to the affordability, accessibility, and safety of menstrual products. And so, as I've mentioned, we will be talking about this and like touching on those elements, but we also really want to focus on the destigmatization in the way that we as a society talk about periods and reproductive care. And so ultimately, we want to disrupt any existing stigmas surrounding periods, which have impacted our personal language, which is what the period word association exercise is supposed to bring up to the surface, but also in ways that have prevented legislative decision makers, healthcare providers, educators, and other individuals in our lives from ensuring that menstrual health is a public and social priority. And one of the ways that we can encourage like self-advocacy and empowerment is understanding what is in our reproductive care products. And so part of the menstrual equity movement is understanding that, as we've mentioned, that a lot of the harmful chemicals that are in our products are not disclosed on the product boxes. And so this is part of the work in menstrual equity and what Women's Voices for the Earth is doing. I always like to preface this slide with my lived truth, which is that I am not a scientist, but it's helpful for me to have just some examples of chemicals to be looking out for, even if I can't say them correctly, and just to know like what specifically are these chemicals doing to my body. And so the first two are CMIT and MI. They're harmful on the body because they're linked to lung toxicity, allergic reactions, and in excess neurotoxicity, which is nervous system damage. Parabens is the one that I'm familiar with. It's the one that I see and use the most in my own social circles. And parabens disrupt hormone functions by mimicking estrogen, and too much estrogen can increase breast cell division and growth of tumors. And so parabens is most commonly linked with breast cancer. And then quat, the last one, I was really interested to find, I did some research on this one myself, and to find that it's in a lot of body washes and cleansers, and specifically cleansers targeted towards the vagina. And so quat is actually an antiseptic, which is used in minor cuts and scrapes. And so the concern here, apart from putting something in your vagina that's supposed to go on a cut and a scrape, is that it can have it impairs the capacity to fight disease and repair damaged tissue in the body. And then kind of wrapping this slide up, and this is coming from the Women's Voices for the Earth website, and I just copied it here as a kind of a disclaimer that while a few studies have attempted to assess and measure potential risks of these products, all of the research has really indicated that there's just more work to be done to better understand the impacts of these products, what they may have on our bodies. but ultimately the reality that we don't have this information readily accessible, and that this isn't advertised, is what is the most concerning. And Maria, please add to this slide as you usually do.
Yeah, so just another point on the quad. These are ingredients that we're not like 100% sure, obviously, what they do and what their purpose is in shampoos and cleansers of that type, but we know that we have found quads in sex toy cleaners, and if they are found in vaginal cleaners, then it's probably for the same reason. They are antibacterials. They're considered pesticides by the EPA, and they're most commonly found in cleaning products. Yeah. Oh, no. Why did you put 2 of them in red and 2 of them in gray? Was it just the slide design?
It was just the slide design.
Thank you for asking that clarifying
special
question. Yeah. And so it's really concerning because they're meant to kill bacteria and viruses, and our vagina is supposed to have bacteria in there to be able to keep it balanced, right? And to have like a healthy bacteria. And so if we're killing that, then we are more prone to diseases and getting infections. And then these quads have also been linked to respiratory illnesses. They've been linked to asthma triggers in cleaning products. They've also been linked to reproductive health harm. And so that's really concerning to have those in vaginal washes and in menstrual and intimate care products, because they're put directly on tissue that is the most absorbent on the body. And then just another point on CMIT and MI, those are whenever we're talking about pads and period products, they're most commonly used in the adhesives that we see. And so the problem with that is that they're not required to be put on the label, right? And if people know that they have allergy problems or that they're more sensitive to those chemicals, they don't know that until they buy the product and they test it on themselves, and then they have an allergic reaction, which is a problem. So yeah.
Thank you, Maria.
And feel free to ask any questions. I know like a lot of the language and information that we have is very scientific as well. So feel free to ask all the questions.
Yeah, I still I need Maria's support whenever when she's doing these workshops with me. I lean on her because for me, because I'm not scientifically minded. So yeah, no shame in asking questions. So because of that, this is a helpful slide for me of what to look out for when buying menstrual products. Just the top 3 concerns: bleached and unbleached, fragrance-free, and chlorine-free. And Maria, importantly, what is the distinction with fragrance-free that we need to make?
Yeah, so usually products will have unscented or fragrance-free. People usually think that if it says unscented, that it's the same thing as fragrance-free, but it's not. It just means that they added fragrance neutralizers. So stay away from unscented products, and that's in general in any intimate and like personal care and really anything out there, any products. So make sure that you stay away from unscented and that you truly go with fragrance free, because that means that they haven't added any fragrance ingredients in there.
Thank you. I love this slide because it breaks down the cost of intimate care products. And I think that I had the assumption for sure when I first started buying my own products that any kind of more sustainable products would be more expensive. When I think what we more run into, like the bigger issue is accessibility, because like where do you find organic cotton pads, and where do you find organic tampons or Diva cups? And they're not going to be on the shelves in like a dollar store or a gas station, but they're typically at like a natural grocers or a Whole Foods. And so what kind of demographics, what kind of audiences are these products targeting, and being made accessible to, I think is the issue. Because when you break down the cost, there really isn't that much of a difference. Right away, looking at the difference between mainstream pads and organic cotton pads, we see that they're basically the same. And then it's a very similar, I'm just going to go to the next slide real quick, but I'll come back. Looking at organic cotton tampons, $7 to $10. And oops. And then mainstream tampons, $7 to $10. So same thing, like really comparable prices. Then you get into the reusable products, and those are going to be more of a cost upfront, but obviously because you get to reuse them over time, and we're going to be releasing hopefully soon some some videography that we did, some fun videography we did like last month for different social media platforms, like maybe we'll be on TikTok, and, and which I made my first TikTok like for the first time last week. It took me an hour. It was exhausting. But where we break down like the annual costs comparatively to reusable products and single-use products. And it's a sizable difference, even though it's a big cost up front. And speaking from my own personal experience, I use a menstrual cup. I use a Diva cup, and I bought it 2 years ago, and it was $40. But I haven't bought anything since. I just clean it. I boil it on the stove in hot water. I don't use any of the cleansers on it. I just boil it in hot water. And so when you break that down to like 2 years, $40 comparatively to single-use products, I'm ultimately saving a lot of money, and just it just reduces stress for me because I don't have to worry about packing along other things. It's great for like a travel lifestyle, or if you live a really outdoorsy lifestyle like I do, then I highly recommend the Diva cup. And I'm not a spokesperson for Diva cup, but I kind of turned into one on this slide. So I'm also really happy to answer any questions about the Diva cup. We also have menstrual underwear on the slide and menstrual discs. I keep saying every time I do this workshop, I say I am going to try the menstrual underwear because even though I use a Diva cup, I still sometimes when I have a heavy flow, I'll leak, and so it would be really nice to use the menstrual underwear for that, and instead of just letting myself free bleed. But we wanting to acknowledge that too, that some people do free bleed. Are there any questions before I move on? Because this is a really heavy,
There's some questions in the chat. So somebody asked, what is a good sustainable choice for heavy flows? And I know you kind of just mentioned it, but it would be good if you could talk about it.
Yeah, so I have a very heavy flow. In high school, before I got my Diva cup, I used, jumbo tampons, and I'd have a pad. I just burned through products. The Diva cup is really great for me and my heavy flow. Again, like the first 2 days when it's at its heaviest, I may leak a little bit. It's not because of my flow though. It's usually because the thing with the Diva cup is, and everybody's body is different, but you have to put it in at a certain angle to make sure that it is doing its purpose of like holding or removing any space around the outside like lips so that your period can't leak through. And so that just kind of takes trial and error. I always say like the relationship with the Diva cup, and I would imagine same with like a menstrual disc or a sponge, is like you have to bond with it with your body and figure out how it fits in your vagina. And once you do, the bond is unbreakable because and I just feel so confident with it in, and I know that I'm not going to leak. And I had a very, very heavy flow, like many pairs of underwear stained, pants leaked through, and it was a major anxiety of mine all throughout middle school and high school. So the Diva cup was really, really good for my mental health when it comes to my period. And I think that's why I'm such a strong advocate for it, because it helped me so much with my heavy flow. So yeah, I highly recommend the Diva cup. And then probably like as a liner, I would recommend the reusable cloth pads for like those days when you know that like I'm just gonna have a heavier flow today. So I would pair maybe like a Diva cup or a disc with then a little reusable cloth or the menstrual underwear.
Mm-hmm. Then there's another one that says, buying period panties are expensive, especially because it's recommended to replace them every 1 to 2 years. And yes, I've honestly never had a period underwear, so I'm not 100% sure. But if they're recommended to replace every like 2 years, then yeah, that can get expensive.
That's
Um,
expensive.
yeah, and the other thing to look out for with menstrual underwear is that there's companies out there, and I'm looking at things that have added nano silver to, and they say that
Mm.
nano silver has an antibacterial property and that it helps with that like odor. And I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about this because one,
That's
one, we don't know 100%, like we don't know for certain, and we have no research really on the impact of silver, and specifically nanosilver on vaginal health, because if it is an antibacterial, then we also have to assume that it's killing bacteria in your vagina, and that's not good, first of all. And then second of all, we don't know, there's no research on what silver and nanosilver does to our waterways. And so if we're washing our period underwear that has nanosilver in it and that's going down our drains when we're washing them, then we don't know what the impact of that is in our waterway system. And then period underwear is also less likely to decompose in the long run. So
helpful.
and lastly, like as a company that is talking about menstrual equity and the shame that surrounds periods, for them to market their products and to add nanosilver as a way to prevent odor, you're essentially saying that periods are dirty and that people smell on their periods, right? Which we have a slide about later on, so we'll get to talk about that. But and then I know there's more questions now that I started to talk about nanosilver. Thanks. Uh, um, does thinks panties have nanosilver? Yeah, so they do. I mean, I think they sell some without nanosilver and they sell some with nanosilver. But if you go on their website, and we've like tried to talk to them about that in the past. So just something to look out for. I mean, obviously, again, we don't. There's no research, and so we don't know 100%. And we don't know for certain what nanosilver does, but be on the lookout for that. I'm not telling you to go throw out your like $50 period underwear from Thinks, obviously, but just be, that's something to look out for whenever you're trying to make these purchases. Then the menstrual discs, there's a pretty popular brand, especially at Target, that's called Flex. They don't make reusable discs, so the ones that they make are meant to be thrown out. But there are companies out there that make reusable discs. They just look more, I don't know if you've ever seen a diaphragm, a female condom, and they're made out of silicone. And so like medical grade silicone, same as like the menstrual cup. Then with the menstrual cup, I have a lot of points. Just last thing is you can buy, they usually have like colors and dyes in them. We haven't done any research, and I don't think there's any research out there about the dyes in menstrual cups. But I would look out for that as well. Like try to buy ones that are just see-through, that are transparent, because the dye in the cups does wear out with time. And so we also don't know if that's because you're boiling it or if it's like if your body's absorbing it or any of that. So just be on the lookout for that. I think Sustain might make some see-through like transparent cups, so just things to be aware of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My Diva cup is transparent see-through, but I don't know. I think now they come out with colorful ones,
Yeah.
and I got, because mine is so old, maybe that's why it's not pink or purple. But I'm grateful that it's not. This is as we kind of close the informational part of the presentation, we're going to get into the meat of the dialogue with things we have heard about periods. And so this is where we really invite sharing of lived experiences and personal stories, either in the chat or if you have unmuting capabilities. Like, we want to hear your voices too. So yeah, this is an interactive portion. So we're going to be presenting kind of several myths or things that we've heard, and then replacing them with more like lived truths. And the first one that Maria already mentioned is you smell bad when you are on your period. And this one's kind of associated with like periods are dirty. Has anyone heard this, been told this, have experience with this feeling?
I have something in the chat. Thank you so much for being honest. But it says, someone said, I have told someone that, and I do smell not so pleasant, is what we're getting in the chat.
Okay. So by itself, being on your period does not cause a foul odor, but because the blood exiting your body does interact with other bacteria already living in the vagina, if left unattended for too long, it can create a smell that you're not used to. So to avoid this, you simply change your tampon pad or menstrual cup more frequently. With my menstrual cup, with my Diva cup, I can leave it, you can leave those in for up to 8 hours, I think. Sometimes I push it, like if I have a long day. Honestly, I just forget it's there because it's just so comfortable and part of my body now. Sometimes I forget it's there. And so, yeah, so if it's been there for more like 8 hours or maybe a little longer, when I take it out, yeah, I smell something, but it's not, for me, it doesn't smell bad. It just smells like my vagina. And once I wash out the Diva cup and put it back in, then I can't really smell that anymore. So again, I think that's just the blood interacting with the bacteria already in my body.
Mm-hmm. We have some other stuff that people put on there. Someone's mom used to say, period blood smell will fry your hair off your head. That's kind of a cute rhyme. I'm not gonna lie. And then it also says, I recently learned our typical detergents are not antibacterial, so our underwear will keep bacteria. Are you talking about like laundry detergent? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's actually probably a good thing that they don't put antibacterial chemicals in, or hopefully they don't put antibacterial chemicals in laundry detergent, because as I mentioned earlier, those chemicals are considered pesticides, and they're linked to respiratory illnesses, reproductive health problems, and they're asthma triggers. And so if we're putting them in laundry detergents and they're mixing with our laundry, right, and most of the time they stay in an area for long periods of time, so like if you don't just like wipe them off or rinse them off, like they can still stay in a surface. And so if we're washing our underwear, especially with antibacterial soaps, then that means that we're putting those pesticides in our vagina, right, and in our vaginal area, which is some of the most absorbent tissue in our body, and that's problematic. So yeah, so that might be why it smells, but it doesn't smell bad. It's just we're just not used to the way that our body normally smells too. So that's something that like we have to culturally change, right, and that we have to get used to. And if you don't like the smell of it and you are not prone to getting like allergic reactions from fragrance, you can wash them with like a bar of soap that kind of has a smell. Just make sure it's not toxic fragrance ingredients, which we have on our website as well. So yeah.
Yes, I think another important aspect of this specific like have you heard is who is the one who in this dynamic, whose voice in this dynamic is the voice saying that this is smelly or this is dirty, and from what demographic are people who menstruate receiving that kind of feedback and pressure to smell like water lilies and rose petals instead of vaginas? And so I think that's an important thing to consider. And typically in the times that I've done this workshop with undergraduate and graduate students, it's coming from their partners if they're in a hetero relationship, or it's coming from their mothers. So it's information that's being passed down, and it's information or feedback coming from people who don't menstruate. So I think that's another important aspect. And so how that knowledge is carried down of that internalized shame of smelling different on your period.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that you cannot swim or take a bath on your period?
This is my favorite slide.
I know.
In the chat we got, I have, but I don't listen. Yes. I wish I was you when I was younger.
Yeah, really.
Swimming, yes. You have heard that. Does anyone have like a story they would like to share? I have plenty, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. We have someone saying that they encourage their friends to take baths.
Good.
I encourage people to unmute themselves if there's a story you want to share. If you can. If you can't, then we can try and figure it out. But it says, somebody said my dad thought blood would attract sharks and fish at the beach. Huh. I've never heard that.
I've heard that.
You've heard that. Okay.
I definitely have heard that. Yes. I mean, it does, but blood does attract animals, obviously. But that's that many times has been used to exclude menstruators from living their lives. And it's not valid in terms of being in the ocean because of, well, I'm not gonna reveal the lived truth yet, unless there are no more comments or stories.
I don't hear anything else.
Alrighty, Maria, do you want to share your story?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I used to swim. Like my mom put me in a swim team and stuff. And I always loved swimming, but then as soon as I got my period, so I use birth control because it's aside from being birth control, but it's also great because I have really irregular periods whenever I don't use birth control. And so I have an IUD now, and I basically don't get my period. So whenever I first got my period when I was 12, I used to go without my period for like months at a time. So like 2 or 3 months. And then I would get like a really heavy flow for like 4 or 5 weeks straight. And so at the beginning of the summer, I would always just like wait for my body to tell me if it was a summer that I was going to spend like with my period or without my period, and if I was going to be able to go to the pool. And so whenever I started my period when I was 12, I think I used a tampon like once, and I thought it was really uncomfortable. And so I just like, if I got my period at the beginning of the month, I would just stop going to the pool. And so I wish I would have known our last, like the second slide. I wish I would have known that you could do this, because I would have gone to the pool. And I remember my mom telling me that like, oh, it was gross to go to the pool without like a tampon on, and like you're just gonna leave this like streak of like blood like behind you, and the pool's gonna be red. That's like all the imagery I had in my head. And I'll let you introduce like the
Yeah,
this.
I mean, I had all of that imagery in my head as well. And I don't think anyone even told me explicitly. I just assumed that if I get into the pool, I'll bleed and I'll attract sharks. I just kind of assumed that. And I never asked anybody. It wasn't until I was like 18 years old, late in my high school years, where my mom told me that I could take a bath without without my tampon in, and that I wouldn't bleed. Because in both instances, whether you're taking a bath or you're going for a swim, the blood will stop because you're submerged in water. And then once you leave the water, your menstrual flow will resume. And I think we've talked about how the water basically creates a vacuum. And so the blood doesn't exit your body. There was one time I experienced this, and I shared this, like, I think the first time I did this workshop. I haven't shared it in a while, but one time I was taking a bath and I was on my period. And what a great time to take a bath. You know, like that's the time that I most need a bath. And so to feel scared not to be able to do something that my body really needs, and then realize that I could, was really liberating. So one time I was taking a bath, and when I got up and out of the tub, my flow resumed with a fury. And it only happened once. It hasn't happened since, but like it was like I stood up and it was like hallelujah. And it felt like a really great release. I don't know if anyone else has ever kind of experienced that, where maybe you're having like, the days that you have a really heavy flow and you just like feel like a big release when you're doing it. Can happen at any time. I don't really have control over it, so I don't know if anyone else has that experience. But some of the more positive parts of having a period. Have you heard, so now the not so great parts of having a period, have you heard that PMS is not a real thing?
Sorry, we have a chat from the last piece. It says that has happened to me before, but I was just getting up because I forgot my loofah and I didn't know how to feel about getting back in my bath water. Yeah, that's real.
Yep.
Yeah, and feel free if you've heard, or to share if you want to, any stories around this, whether people have told you that it's not real or if people have told you that like have invalidated your feelings and emotions because you're PMSing, because I feel like we hear that all the time, but would love to hear some stories from people. We're good on time, so we can wait a little longer. So in the chat it says, no, but yeah, I've been invalidated for PMSing. Somebody has never heard of this. Do any of you want to share any more stories on that? Like go a little deeper.
I can.
Thank you.
Had a very bad PMS. I'm just very sad and emotional, and everyone in my life knows it. But it happens more with men than women. If they know I'm on my period, which I'm kind of open about. They're like, "You're just PMSing. You're being emotional," and I'm like, "No, but these are real problems. I'm just being more open with you because I'm PMSing."
Yeah, I think. Thank you. I think that highlights a really important point that I like to bring up on this slide a lot, is that often I either hear PMSing being used as a way to invalidate the pain or emotions that we go through when we're on our periods, or to invalidate the existence of pain and emotions on our period. So it's either used to say like, oh, well, you're just PMSing, so it's not that big of a deal, or stop being so like stressed and irritated or emotional, like you're just on your period and PMS isn't real. So like I've heard it in both of those kinds of contexts. Again, usually coming from like when I've been in a relationship with a hetero cisgendered male. And I think what it does and what it propagates is that periods are something that we just have to deal with, and that it's just assumed that we get through it. We have to power through it, and that any kind of pain or emotions that arise when we're menstruating should be kept to ourselves and dealt with privately, which can be emotionally, mentally, and physically dangerous. because PMS is very much a real thing, as our hormones change during menstruation. If and this is where I really like to talk and share knowledge. If you have been able to identify conditions linked to your menstruation cycle, the best tool in treating it is preventative care and finding remedies that will alleviate any pain or discomfort you are feeling. And so here, I would really love to hear people's own personal remedies or ways that they alleviate pain. And so we can kind of share knowledge around that at this time.
And I have some stuff in the chat, but it's like not 100% related to this. So I'll share them after people share their remedies.
Perfect.
Oh, that's interesting. Somebody put that they're not sure why, but when they take probiotics every day, they don't get cramps. That's really interesting. I've never heard of that. And then somebody else, heating pain, or like the heating pads, I'm guessing, and ibuprofen. Yeah, that's whenever I used to get periods and cramps, that's usually what I did as well. Tea, heating pads, and ibuprofen.
Yep. Me too.
And then somebody else, tea and baths. A bath. That sounds nice. I might go take a bath later.
No, that does sound nice. And I'm on my period, so it's timely.
Perfect.
It's time. Perfect. I used to take a lot of ibuprofen. I remember, so my PMS, one of the I'm trying not to say anything negative, but they just suck. My cramps just suck. And so when I would experience cramps, when I first experienced cramps, and it's not just cramps, and I don't know if anyone else feels this too. And I just, for the first time, because of these workshops, started talking about this specific side effect that happens to me all the time, and it's really debilitating. And I was talking about it with a really good friend, and then I brought it up in a workshop I did earlier this week, and almost everyone also experienced it. So I'm just curious. I get like rectal spasms, or like severe like anal pain, and like it feels like my mom is like, me too. My mom's here.
There's people in the chat that agree with you as well. You're not the only one.
And it feels so bad, and like it'll bring me to tears. And so the fear of that pain, I used to take like too much ibuprofen. I would take 4 to 6 like pills of ibuprofen, maybe twice a day, so that I wouldn't feel that pain, because it would be so debilitating, keel me over. And eventually, though, I started feeling different kinds of effects from taking that much ibuprofen so consistently. And it got to a point where I needed to seek out like different kinds of remedies. And so I tried baths and heating pads and tea, and sometimes someone told me to have a glass of wine. And so I did a lot of different things, and I still get those spasms. And it wasn't until I talked about it with my doctor that we started talking about birth control as a means of alleviating and kind of mitigating that pain. And it has a lot. And I still take ibuprofen on like the first day of my period, because that's when it's the heaviest and kind of I feel the most crampy. But I don't have to take 4 to 6 pills anymore. It's just 2. So that significantly has improved. Being on birth control has worked for me, and I'm on Sprint Tech is what I take. And so far the pill is working for me. I remember to take it consistently enough, but I understand the pill doesn't work for everybody. And so feel free to share like other kinds of mitigation tactics that you have.
Yeah. I looked it up online because somebody else was asking like, what is that? Because they've been complaining to their partner about this. And I looked it up, and it is something that can happen with periods. And I know we have a slide on this later, and I don't want to scare anyone, but it could also be a sign that you have endometriosis. I mean, there's like other symptoms as well. So like if they could be paired with something else, but it is normal. I guess it's also normal for that to happen when you're pregnant as well. So I don't know how far along that would happen, but yeah, I guess it's normal. Wow. I'm so sorry y'all have to go through that. I feel bad.
It's terrible. You don't feel bad, but thank you for feeling bad. Don't feel bad, but thank you. It is terrible. But and that's why it was really important for me. I was experiencing so much pain, and then sometimes I would experience pain, and I experienced if I would get I would go into the emergency room and thinking I would have like a UTI, even when I wasn't on my period, because I was experiencing that kind of pain. And once I started working for Women's Voices for the Earth, I thought I really need to like advocate for myself and go to find a doctor that will listen and and will help me find a way to manage this pain, and especially if it's even more serious, I need to know. And so like I went in and I went ahead and got a pap smear and blood testing, and just to make sure and to eliminate endometriosis, which we'll talk about more.
Yeah. But I do have a lot of comments in the chat, so
oh, perfect. Please interrupt. Yeah, you can interrupt me, Maria.
So somebody says, I have PCOS, so I'm used to have a lot of extra stuff. I always forget what PCOS stands for. Okay, I got it. Polycystic ovarian syndrome. And it's a hormonal disorder common among women or people of reproductive age. People with PCOS may have infrequent or prolonged menstrual periods or excess male hormones, which are androgen levels. The ovaries may develop numerous small collections of fluid and fail to regularly release eggs. So it's not, it's not deadly. So but it's just a condition you could have. Then, have you all heard about cycle syncing? Syncing, yeah, that word always trips me up. Syncing, eating to complement the different phases in your cycle. I'm trying to get into this slowly but surely. Ooh, okay, I have heard of cycle syncing. And whenever I used to live with my parents, my sister, my mom, and I would have like our periods at around the same time. And I've heard there's like different theories about it, but I remember talking about this when I was in high school to like my AP biology teacher, and she said that it's most likely attributed to the fact that hormones, the main way that we release hormones is through skin. And so if we're like touching people or like leaving hormones like on surfaces or whatever, that's probably why like our periods do sync whenever you live with other menstruators. Or if you spend too much time with other menstruators, that could be why. But there's not really like a ton of information out there or like research that's been done on this, honestly. Have you heard that, Isabella? I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
I've only ever heard it kind of like pop culturally and like within my social circles, like oh, we're syncing and like we're lining up, and like if you live with another menstruator, you'll sync up with them, and like I've heard that, and I've experienced it, but it's never like the exact same day. It's just, but it's usually like within the same week. When I was living with another menstruator, we would sync up, and so I mean, I do think there's a lot of really fascinating, like metaformic theory that I'm considering writing a paper on for my PhD program, which basically is analyzing the ways in which like menstrual cycles have influenced our perception of time and our perception of community, specifically like why our calendars are the way they are, and someone points out kind of tongue-in-cheekily like, well, who else needs to count to 30 days? And everyone's cycle is different, but like the mainstream or like the most common, I think, is you get it like once every 30 days. And but some people menstruate twice a month, some people don't menstruate. Now with all the different ways that we alleviate like our PMS, our cycles change, right? But there's a lot of really fascinating like menstrual theories out there, and for in conversations and dialogues about like time and community. And so I would love to dig more into those conversations.
Yeah.
And I
And
probably
Mariah,
definitely, yeah, I definitely will. Mhm.
yeah. And I hope I'm saying your name right, but I think it's Mariah. Or Marie. Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry. But she's saying that she meant cycle syncing as in syncing your food to complement your menstrual phases. My bad. I'm so sorry. I misread that.
Okay.
But so that what you do, I guess, is like you have your 4 phases and you eat food that replenishes your body with different
I love that.
nutrients.
I love that. I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, that way to like remain optimal through your different phases. I have never heard that, and I am really
Never heard that.
interested now. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
do some research on this.
Yeah.
I'm writing it down right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for, and this is why I love doing these workshops, because I feel like somebody,
Yeah.
like we always learn from each other.
Learn
so
something.
much.
We do.
Oh, it is Mariah, like Mariah Carey. Okay, cool.
Perfect.
Andrea Vitti, in the flow book. Okay, I'm gonna write this down because this is really
Awesome.
cool. Period, food. Go ahead. You can keep going. Oh no, wait, no,
All
there
right.
were other things in the chat. Hold on.
There's more things. Okay.
Yes.
And this one kind of relates this
Mhm.
myth and live truth. So we'll continue the conversation for sure.
Yeah.
But what else is in the chat?
So then somebody else had put to go back. Okay. What about clots? Does Diva Cup help with that? Do you could you explain a little more what you mean by clots, maybe?
Is clot?
Clots,
Clot?
like a clot of blood.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
And then the other thing, and Brittany, feel free to, you can type or you can unmute yourself to explain that a little more. It's up to you. But there's another question that said, oh wait, hold on, maybe. That said, is it normal to feel horny on your cycle? And I think it is. I think so, 100%. And I'm so glad you pointed. We have never answered this question. We should put that as a have you heard.
Yeah, we should. You're right, because I talked about it earlier this week, and we kind of the group that was talking earlier this week, like, it is normal to feel however you need to feel on your period, but yes, it's very common to have like a higher sex drive when you're on your period. It's also common, and there were some stories shared of then birth control impacting your sex drive, like, and libido, and lowering it. And so, not wanting to manage like your sexual freedom and your desires, but also manage your period pain or whatever symptoms you have with your PMS. Like, that's why it's really important to have like these kinds of conversations, and so that you can fully like advocate for yourself when you're like seeking any kind of medical attention or advice or help from other people, so that we can kind of get used to saying, like, this is what I like about my body when I'm on my period, and this is what I don't like, and like this is what I need help with. And so yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to, something else that I want to add to that is, I wonder if because when I experience being horny on my period, I wonder if it's because I think, or I've been told, like, I can't have sex when I'm on my period, so then the forbidden becomes enticing. And it raises my libido, and I'm like, oh, but I can, but and so I wonder if that's an element of it, when you like you very much can have sex on your period. But like the lack of desire maybe from your partner to have sex with you on your period, that's something to talk through and destigmatize too.
So it says, somebody asked, is it unhealthy to have period or have sex on your period? Like, is it, I know it's a preference, but medically, is there anything wrong with having sex on your cycle? Does it help with cramps? So we are not medical professionals. So medically speaking, we cannot tell you whether it's safe or not. But I have yet to hear my OBGYN tell me it's not
Yeah, same.
and hear from other doctors tell
Same.
folks that it's not. And I have heard that it does help with cramps actually.
Yeah.
And I know I get it. Sometimes people are like, oh, but it's messy and stuff. And you can get, so there's like diaphragms that you can use. You can use the cup. You can use um, a menstrual disc. Well, I don't know if you can use a cup, but you can use a menstrual disc to prevent your uterus like shedding more blood when you're having sex, right? So like then you have like something to catch it essentially, so that it doesn't just like spill everywhere. Is that if that's like a concern that you have? But yeah, somebody else said, I think I get horny because my body knows it's harder for me to get pregnant then. And yeah, but it also depends. Like I've heard there's bodies that, and I feel like this would be me, that your other egg, like because you have like two ovaries and they produce eggs at different times. It could potentially be that like one of your ovaries has like a mature egg. So if you do get sperm up there, it could potentially get you pregnant. But again, I'm not a medical professional. Like I don't know if that's a possibility.
Just to echo what Maria is saying, like I think that it's an opportunity to talk about your body like with your medical professional. And so that you can like, that's what we want to really like empower people to do, and to like be able to talk about their periods openly. In terms of using the Diva Cup in sex, like it depends on like what kind of sexual activity you want to participate in. Like the Diva Cup is really great for like keeping fluids in, as I've said, because I have a really heavy flow. And so I can engage in like oral sexual activity or other forms of sexual activity and not have any kind of like blood mess. Or blood escape, we'll say, instead of mess. I like that, blood escape. So, and it's just about figuring out though, like what product works for you, and having that conversation with your partner about what you're both comfortable with. But and also having those conversations with your medical professionals. But like we can empower you to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. Oops, I keep doing that. Oh dear. So this is really kind of going hand in hand with what we've been talking about already. Like, don't worry, you're just having a bad period. And again, I'm wanting this to be like in the context, it doesn't have to be, but in the context of someone invalidating like your emotions or your feelings. And since we've kind of already talked about this, I might just keep going for the sake of time. Like we mentioned earlier, and again, this is not to scare anybody, but just to empower you to advocate for yourself, that you may have endometriosis, which is a gynecological disorder and chronic condition that makes menstruation a very painful and challenging process with heavier flows, extreme fatigue, and chronic pain around the pelvis. And we wanted to highlight this specific have you heard, because of the amount of cases that go undiagnosed of endometriosis, because of the reasons we've been talking about, because we menstruators don't know how to talk about like the pain they're experiencing, are pressured not to talk about it, pressured to power through it, or maybe not having access to these kinds of conversations or medical professionals as well. Like there's a lot of I think that there's a lot of different like intersectional levels to this issue, in terms of like who's getting diagnosed and who's not getting diagnosed, and whose pain is being validated and whose pain's not being validated. So like in Nadia Okamoto's book, who's the author of Period Power, a manifesto for the menstrual movement, she highlights how endometriosis, undiagnosed cases of endometriosis are higher in communities of color. And it's like for the reasons that I just listed. And there's an assumption that we have higher tolerance for pain and get through it. And there is a long history of being invalidated and and not trusted in medical environments. So I want to honor that experience in this specific have you heard. But I also don't want to scare people, and and because we talked about like the rectal spasms and that may be a sign of endometriosis. Like again, like for this community, like talk about it with your doctor. Maria, you unmuted. Do you have anything to add?
I did, but it escaped. I
It's
agree with everything you said.
okay, good. Okay, good. Are there any comments in the chat? I know we've been talking about this already, so we might be repeating ourselves, but please feel free to share more stories.
Yeah.
More
I
comments.
know we may have about 10 minutes left, but if anyone has like any experiences of like your doctor not listening to you, or like not trusting your doctor because of that, because of all the things that we've talked about, or just wanted to let you know that this is a space that you can share that if you feel comfortable doing so. Yeah.
Thanks, Maria.
Yeah.
This is a time where we open it up for other things that we've heard about periods, things that we didn't list in our myths and lived truths. There's one that I want to just like quickly add that we didn't include for the sake of time, but I do think it's important, and I want to make sure that Women's Voices for the Earth is clear on their stance on this, that we're clear in our stance on this. And it's that if you've noticed, like throughout the workshop, I've been saying menstruator, and that's been kind of like that's a very intentional signifier, because you don't have to be a woman or a girl to be bleeding or to have a cycle or to have a uterus. And so just like recognizing that you can be presenting outwardly presenting any gender identity and still like have a uterus. And so just honoring that. And that's why we intentionally have been using menstruator throughout. So one of the myths that we use that I took out of this version of the workshop, but I use it a lot for undergraduates, is only women and girls have periods. And that's where we kind of get into that dialogue. But I took it out of this workshop just for the sake of time. And but I just wanted to like bring it up here in the free space. And if there are any other comments or things that you've heard, or myths, this is an opportunity to go ahead and share those experiences. And I might just keep going, and Maria just kind of interrupt me because we're just wrapping up now.
That sounds good. I'll interrupt you.
Yeah. So what can we do moving forward? We are going to be releasing a Train the Trainer. So what the goal with these workshops is, yes, to like destigmatize the way we talk about periods, but also to enable leadership in the communities that we are bringing this workshop to. And so if you have like a community or a workspace or with your friends and you want to host the Our Stories, Our Flow workshop series, we will have a Train the Trainer packet being released very soon, I would assume.
Next week, actually.
Next week. And so if you're interested in that, please reach out to me, and I will get you connected, or Maria, and we'll get you connected to the Train the Trainer packet, and all of the information that comes with that, so that you can do what I just did. Share your period story. So keep sharing your stories with your friends, your family, with your communities. That's part of the work of destigmatizing the way we talk about periods. You can go to the Women's Voices for the Earth website. We have a lot of resources, and you can support the Menstrual Right to Know Act, because as we said at the beginning, the biggest issue with ingredient disclosure is that it is lacking on our intimate care products. And so by signing the Menstrual Right to Know Act, we are holding companies accountable for the ingredients that they're putting in our products. And then ultimately continue the destigmatization of period talk in your community. And then again, at the bottom, switch to unscented or fragrance-free, look for organic cotton, and then look for unbleached or chlorine-free.
Yeah, I have one comment in the chat. So what about the myth of feeding someone your blood will make them fall for you? I know a lot of shows use it as a comedy skit, but do you know Or do you have any idea where that stigma or thought comes from?
I don't know where that comes from. I'd have to do more research. But I've seen that. I think that, I mean, just from my own, speaking from my own like social location and the education that I'm receiving right now, and I think that a lot of the time we see like in like popular media the like maybe the mystifying or appropriation of what could have been some kind of indigenous practice, and so kind of taking those like very carefully and receiving that information very carefully, and in ways that that honor and don't like mystify communities, I think is important. And so yeah, I think like that would be something that would be like my mindset in like addressing like that kind of a myth of like, okay, like who is like saying this myth, and like what is their intention, what's their intention with it, where did they get this information from, and like is this doing harm to a community, or like is this misrepresenting a community? And so having those kinds of questions in mind, I try like based on the kinds of things that I've heard when I'm doing these kinds of workshops, and there's lots of kind of like magic around menstruation, but just like being really honorable with the way that we're receiving those kinds of myths, if that's making sense.
Yeah. Oh, I thought I would ask because my dad would tell my brothers never to eat a woman's spaghetti or anything with red sauce. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to look. You're welcome to keep going. I'm trying to look for the Menstrual Right to Know
Okay.
Act link for people to sign up, and where you can sign
Okay.
up to host your own workshop too. So that's
Thanks,
why,
Maria.
if I'm distracted, that's why.
Okay. I just want to make sure you weren't reading the chat.
Yeah.
If there are any questions, similarly, like as we've been doing, like, you know, very, very free flow, you can go ahead and ask any questions in the chat. There are no bad questions. And this is a good space for it. And finally, if you do want to keep connecting and you're interested in any of the resources that we shared, and getting more information, you are more than welcome to contact me. I have my email there and Maria's email anytime, and we would be more than happy to connect with you and to answer your questions and get you involved with Women's Voices for the Earth.
I know we have about 4 or 5 minutes left. So if people want to share
Yeah,
more
if you have any
questions, yeah.
Now's the time.
And I'm going to be putting some links in there.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there like a repository or maybe even an app that you could like, or that tells you like the different chemicals or things you should be aware of for your menstrual products? Or is that something that you just have to kind of do your own research on?
That's a great question. So on the website for Women's Voices for the Earth, we have a Ken Fatale report, and the list of products in the Hall of Shame. So like I have screenshots of those on my phone, and I reference those when I'm like thinking about buying a different product. But because of my own practices, because of what I do with my body, and I only use the Diva cup and I just boil it, like I don't like typically engage with that. But it's also helpful with other products like shampoos or body washes, or, you know, like any other kind of like hygienic product. Those two resources on our website will be really helpful. And there is an app, and it's called EWG. What does that stand for again, Maria?
The organization is Environmental Working Group, and they have an app called Think Dirty. Here's the thing. So
yeah, it's
Think Dirty is good for like personal products, but because menstrual products are not required to disclose their ingredients by law, you can't find them. So like if a company decides to disclose their ingredients, it's like, I mean, the way that it feels like, it's like they're doing the public a favor, right? Because they're not required to by law. But by October of next year is when, so we passed the law in New York, A164, with other organizations, and we did that last year in 2019, and that is going into effect October of next year of 2021, and that's when we should see companies starting to release their ingredients. We are going to be doing a lot of work around implementation of that law and what companies are releasing and what they're not releasing. So the law should, it just says like any intentionally added ingredient, and so they should disclose all intentionally added ingredients. So we'll see how that goes. Stay in the loop, follow Women's Voices for the Earth, and we'll let you know. We might also be hiring for another menstrual equity organizer next year. So if you follow us on social media, and our website is womensvoices.org, you'll get information about that. And the other thing is, I'm just gonna drop in the chat the link to sign up for other menstrual other OSOF workshops, because this was a kind of a more abbreviated version of it.
Abbreviated.
Yeah, and we have some coming up here like the first week of December. And that even if you register and if you don't attend, I mean, we encourage you to attend, because then you get to see Isabella's lovely face again. But even if you don't attend it, you should get that packet with the train the trainer sign up later on. So I'll drop that
then we'll
in
have
the chat.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, with that, I have 10:16 on my clock, so I want to make sure we stay on the agenda. And I'm really grateful, even though I can't like see anybody. I'm grateful that you all participated in the chat and that some of you spoke up. And I would love to have anyone in the workshops in the first week of December. We're going to be doing workshops with some seminary students and some nursing students. So it will be like a really we should have like very different perspectives and like rich dialogue. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I would love for anyone to register and participate, so I can also see your faces.
Yes, and we'll let you know if we get a TikTok.
That's right. Oh gosh, TikTok is
an
so
organization.
Yes.